Adeptus Mechanicus, Belasarius Cawl. Join me, paint him, field him in the field of conflict.
Well, good morning and welcome back to Darkstone Rising. You catch me having a little bit of breakfast pre-filming. Lovely beautiful morning here, and this is the first time I've been filming probably in about 6 months. I've had some important exams to sit, so I've been busy revising for those. They're out of the way now. Had a few live things going on as well, but hopefully service resumed as normal. So today we're going to have a look at Belasarius Cawl. I'm going to paint him for one of my good friends, a chap called Mark, who he's just started playing with Admech, so I promised him I'd get a figure out for him. So only one thing really left to say. God, getting back in the habit. Over to the table! Well, hello. And here we are, back indeed at the table. This is the mighty Belasarius Cawl, who I've no idea if he's actually mighty. Not very familiar with Admech, to be honest. I've only just started fighting them as one of my friends has decided to pick them up as an army. And I said I would paint him a leader figure. And here he is. And stupidly, I chose Belasarius because he is a nightmare to build. Lots of fiddly little bits on him. And also, looks like he's going to be equally fiddly to paint. But there we go, promises and promises, and here I am. So that's the figure. Now, as I do these videos, one of the things I am going to do is try and talk through some of the equipment. If there's new players out there, new hobbyists out there, then there's lots of questions I know about paint, about glue, about what brushes to use. And it's actually a lot simpler than it seems when you first approach the hobby. So first of all, basics. This is a wet palette, and it is simply, for me, it's a Ferrero Rocher tray with some supermarket sponges and then some baking parchment, not baking greaseproof paper. The greaseproof paper would just repel the water below it and you'd never get some absorbency. And the whole principle of these, the idea, is that the water keeps the paint slightly moist and stops it drying out. Brush-wise, I've got a wide selection from, today I'm going to use some slightly more expensive ones, some of the Artis Opus range, although I do use cheap as chips stuff like these. These are Boldmere. You used to be able to get these from local hobby stores and things, but the company, I don't know whether they've gone bankrupt, but they've seemed to have disappeared, but they made some excellent synthetic brushes. And so I'm just slowly running out of those miserably. Paint-wise, I use a lot of Vallejo and Citadel, although I do use other companies like AK, Acryl. We'll talk about it as we progress through. But paints, don't get too hung up on them. Things like Vallejo, Citadel, absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about anything else. So where to start on the model? Well, I think what we'll do is try and work from the inside outwards, and so that we're not touching over things as we carry on painting. So the first thing is to try and get these legs done underneath, and we'll run those with a coat of some sort of metallic. I think there's actually a group of metallic paints. Let me just go grab them. So where I think we're going to start is with Vallejo. Now these are actually airbrush paints, but they have got such a good flow to them. I'm going to start with gunmetal, and when you use these, you'll see what I mean. The actual way that they go on the model is absolutely amazing. They just flow so smoothly. So I'll just pop a little bit of that on, bring the model a bit closer so you can see what's going on. And there we can see his foot still on the book, and if you look, as I just stroke across, it just glides onto the model, and it's almost like it wants to cover the model for you. Absolutely brilliant paints. So what I'll do is I will just go put that base coat, as you can see, it's gone on lovely. I'll put that base coat on any metalwork I can see that's just protruding, all these little finesse bits here, that's protruding from beneath the cloak, and we'll cover those first. And as for cleaning my brushes, between steps, just a bit of a swirl in your pot, and then just make sure that you draw backwards on the brush so you're not damaging the brushes themselves. Give them a nice clean. If you think you've probably still got a little bit of paint left on the brush, into your cleaning soap. There are lots of different companies on the market. All of them do more or less the same thing. Can't say I've found a real favourite, to be honest, and I use 3 or 4 different types. But it's just getting the soap into the brush, and then you will see if there's any residue as you stroke backwards. So you can see that the magnesium has given us some lovely coverage. Now, although the Vallejo airbrush is lovely for actually covering, if I was now to pick out the highlights with that, it tends to run, and so it would be virtually useless for doing this type of work unless you're very precise. So I've chosen a much firmer plastic. I've gone over to Vallejo Game, and this is chainmail silver. So what it's going to do is pick out all the shiny edges for us. It's a much, as you can see in the pot here, I've obviously got some, but you can see just as I wiggle it, it's a much firmer, stiffer paint, and therefore it's better for the precision work of putting on some sharp edges, or those edges that you just think might be scuffed during combat or scuffed during walking, and it just gives them that little bit of a shiny edge. So we'll go around all those upper surfaces, just giving them a little dab. Any sharp blades will give a little bit of an edge to as well. Just little lines on the blade just to make it look slightly serrated. And then again on this blade here, just on the downside edge and on the inside edge where it's meant to be sharper. On these feet also, on those upper surfaces. Catch the spikes down this leading edge. And just anything that's going to be like an upper surface area that's going to catch light. And just to bring out a little bit more definition so you can see the accent points, the points of interest on the model, just give you a bit of differentiation. When you're doing the coil work, if you just have a very light load on your brush, wipe off the excess so it's nice low load on your brush, and then just run down the corrugations and it'll just leave a little deposit on the upper surface corrugations. Catch those top surface areas. When you're looking at the little clamps on the end, just make sure you dab inside the lower portion on the upper edge. Catch those spikes, upper edge of the lower clamp. Because it is such a thick paint, you will have to just put your brush in the water every now and again as well. But you can see it's just bringing out that definition and giving it a bit more highlight. We're going to ruin all that in a moment, but for now we're going to work around the model and actually highlight all of that and just bring out those edges on all the pieces I've done around the model. You can see there's little bits all the way around, and we'll just work around them. So as we take a look around the model, you can see that all that metal work that's poking out from underneath the cowls and the habit, dress, whatever you want to call it, all is super shiny now. Now we are going to resolve that in a future stage, but what I want to do is I want to amalgamate the weathering on the shiny bits with the robes. So if that's the case, if I start doing it now, when I do the others later, I don't want there to be two different tones of colour going on. So we'll leave all this shiny now, and then we'll integrate the two all in one phase. So I think the next step is to work on the robes, get those into a beautiful red colour with some deep tones in the shadows, and we'll work on that next. One of the things you may have noticed is that all of the metal paints I've been using have been in a separate tray, and the problem is if you put them on the parchment paper, they tend to, after a little while, sink through and actually disperse into the sponge underneath and ruin the sponge. So I tend to work with metals in a separate pot, and this is a Reaper Miniatures plastic container that the miniature was kept in, just repurposing. Right, on with the rest. So let's get some red ready. So the first colour I've gone for is not red at all, but heavy violet. It's a game Vallejo game colour, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dominantly put it into the recesses, so all these deep folds here, which means that when I do apply the red, there will already be some natural shading in the shadow areas. So we'll just run that in. Into all those deep crevices, and then bring it out onto some of the flat panel work, but not onto the crests. We'll just keep it sort of very localized. Where there's that deep fold and it comes straight out onto light, I'm going to avoid painting that with anything purple. We'll just stay in the creases, and then again into this crease here. And anything that's not quite in the direct light will get a coat of this purple. So I'm going to work my way around all the rest, and then we'll come back once that purple is applied. As it dries, obviously it's going to sink deeper into the black, but I don't want to leave it too long before I'm painting the next layer. So if I'm working on that purple within the next 2 hours, the red will sink into it. We'll get a lot of blending of tone, and we'll get a lot of the work done for us by the paint. So if you leave it to dry overnight, the purple will harden off, and then you're going to find it much harder to blend the two, and you're probably going to have to remix some more purple. So let's get on. So when I'm actually painting with blacks, my dominant black, my workhorse, is a Vallejo black 70.950. It gives you one of the richest blacks without going to anything expensive. I possess some Musso, which is one of the blackest blacks, but you don't need that type of stuff for working on a model. It gives you adequate shade. Now what I am going to do is, and I'll show you a bit closer, is if you look at just underneath any armour panel where it would give a bit of shade, I've also painted the purple under there as well as in the recesses. Now what I'm also going to do, and I'm also going to work on the cowl up here in a second, but is under those armour sections I'm going to mix a very, very small amount of Vallejo black in with the purple, which is violet, heavy violet. And then that will just run under all of these and just give it that extra bit of depth under there before we put any red on. So I'll work around the model doing that, and then I'll come back and show you the finished result. So I think I'm going to aim for that sort of that blanchette, so slightly darker tone. So it's certainly going to end up with the lighter tones in the highlights, but I think we're going to go for that more of a burnt red leading through to bright red on the uppers. So I've gone for again a Vallejo colour, burnt red. I'm going to start working with that. I'm going to blend that in with the purple, and I'll just show you a little bit here. You can see where I've done mixed the black in just underneath there with the purple to give it a bit of darker tones. So we'll just put a few little strikes along there. And trying to catch some of the upper surface. And what you'll find is over the next few moments, this will start to sink in a little bit with the purple, and you'll get some natural blending taking place. We're just going to try and give it some coverage on the upper surfaces. May even catch a little bit of the purple in with the burnt red, and just may force that tone to shift together in some places where it's not quite blending as well as I would like. Do keep plenty of water on the brush to assist your painting. Just keep it nice and mobile across the figure. If you notice, I'm trying to stay away from those little cracks. I want to highlight those later, so I'm trying not to go into those cracks, just strike literally over the top of them like I'm doing again with this one here. Into the mixture of the purple and the burnt red as we come back into the shadow area. And that purple that we left behind before will leach through, will assist us in generating the colours we're after. Just gentle strikes around the shadow area. We don't want to go too deep into there with too much colour. And as we hit these upper surfaces, just go a little bit heavier with the paint. We're going to get some higher tones of red on there later. And then where there's the darker shadows, we just lightly stroke with those. And we're saving the brush for when there's less pigment on the brush to go back into the darker areas. And then as we're in these higher toned areas here, that's where we're leaving a lot of paint. And then as we go back into the shadows, gentle strokes, not leaving much behind, letting the purple do some of the work for us. And what we'll do is we'll carry on around the model and just that technique all the way around, slowly blending the two together. If we go into a shadow and we think, like I'll do it deliberately here, I'll go a bit too far in, and we think that we've made a little bit of a mess, we get a bit of purple, put it on the brush, mix it with a little maybe of the black purple, and just retone the darker area. And it will also help give us a layer of transition as well in colour. So as we come up onto those upper surfaces, the upper surface reds will look much stronger, and it will give us that natural cast of lighting. And then on these undersurfaces I'm leaving it the deep purpley colour, and that's just going to help us later with some natural two-tone lighting. It'll look smashing when it's all done. And then, like I say, we'll carry on working around the model. And at the moment it looks a bit dirgy, it looks a little bit monochromatic, but it's going to build. We're going to get there. We're going to get some nice colours blending through with this. Right, so we've now got to this horrible dirgy red colour, but we can start to see what's happening. We can start to see some depth, some shadows, and now we need to get to the brighter stuff and pick out some colour. So we're going to swap over to a red. This, just to give you an idea of time frame, this has so far taken about an hour and a half to get to this point. I know there are some wonderful artists out there who work at breakneck speed, people like Marco Frazzoni, for instance, whose artwork is phenomenal and his speed is just amazing to watch. I am not one of those artists, and I work at a bit more of a steady plod, as I'm sure a few more of you out there do. But we will continue on this model and we will get him finished. So on with the red. So now we're going to try and bring some red. A nice way to get a smoothness to the changing colours is if you start to blend the next layer with the previous layer. So here we've got some of the burnt red, and my next colour in the scheme is going to be a scarlet blood, going a whole step higher in the colour scheme. And you can see just looking here at the difference, and then I'm mixing the two together in this puddle in the middle, and that's about probably around about a 2/3 amount of the bright red mixed with about 1/3 of the burnt red. And what we'll do is we'll apply that next. We'll take some off the brush because that's quite heavily loaded, and then we'll take it on the highlights and just gently work it in. Again, trying to avoid going into those little gaps in the robes. And just gently tapping it onto the upper surfaces. And creating quite a dramatic edge just work tiny little bits of light bits of paint in to just give it a little bit of continuity down into that shadow work a little bit. But then again, when we come up on this edge, there's quite a sharp line where we've got this change in colour. Just really addressing the shades. There's a little crinkle there, we just need to catch that top edge. Run it in a little bit there to catch it down into that shadow edge, and then a bit stronger stroke with the brush on that upper surface. We'll go back to the colour, and what I will do is I'll just finish this little section, and then what I'll do is I'll go back with the bright red, and you can see it's almost stippling I'm using here, and what we'll do is we'll go back to the bright red in a second and work that in on top, because then we're not really giving the colour a chance to dry, to settle before we're blending in. And yeah, we're using a little bit of wet blending. Okay, so that's starting to pick out a bit more vibrancy in the colour. We'll then go into the red. I've still got a bit of the old colour on my brush, so it's going to add to that. Not too much of a rush change of one area to another. And we're going for a smaller amount of the area. I'm just going to catch the bottom edges of where the holes are, where the light would fall. But we've just reduced the amount of area that we're hitting with the paint. And again on this hole here, again we'll try and catch the bottom edge with colour. Just to accentuate where the light is hitting. And now I'm sure that you'll be able to see that you can really quite strongly see the colour changes working them in together. And the stippling adds to like making it look a little bit more like fabric rather than just a smooth metallic surface. So what I'll do is I'll leave that, I'll work around the rest of the model and I'll leave it to dry a few moments, because while it's wet like this you don't really get the full impact of what you're trying to achieve. It still looks a bit glossy and shiny, and it's only as the colours go off that you actually get that transition and that really nice effect of what you're trying to achieve. I think I will just go back to the mixture of the two and just push on this upper surface just a little deeper into the shadow. There we go. So now I'll work around the rest of the model, leave it a few moments just to let the colours settle a little bit before we start to look at highlights and finishing the red. So now we can start to see that the brightness is really coming through. That's going to be wonderful for when we darken it back up later with some of the weathering and toning, but you can really see the shades happening there and it's starting to come together. So now we need to go to do the highlights on the red and just pick out a few areas, put some textures on, and for that we're going to start to move in with a bit of a paler colour mixed with the red. So the next step is to add in the highlights. For that I'm going to get some pale flesh, again another game colour. We're going to mix the red in with the flesh tone. Give that a bit of a clean. And then what we're going to do is go in and do the highlights.
So if we come to the edge of the model, and what we're going to do is just, got a bit much on the brush there, just come to where all the edges of the cloth, where they would catch the light at the edges, and also just emphasize where these little holes are as well. Just try and catch the lower side of each of the little holes and the edge of the robe. And then what we'll do is we'll gently come down the very ends of like where the robe highlights are, so those higher details. Just blend a bit of that in there. Lower edge of any hole again. Top end of a crease again. And it's just really just pushing the colour a little bit further, emphasising what we've already started to ascertain as the upper edges. The red, because it's still wet from the previous coat, it won't have completely dried out yet. This will not be quite as an obvious white. It will blend in with the red. And it will start to look very subtle as it all dries and blends together. Just catching all those upper surfaces. It's not a heavy coat, it's a gentle coat. So I am just dabbing very, very lightly with the brush. Then go back in on that bottom edge. And I may even grab a little bit of the flesh on its own, maybe a tiny, tiny bit, and on the bottom edges of these holes, just re-emphasise with light dabs. And then on the edges of the robe, just little flicks of colour, and your eye will sort of do the rest of the work. It will know that that's ragged cloth. It will know that's what you're trying to give it the instruction of, and it will sort of capture and fill that image in for you. Try and get a little bit closer for you. And what we'll do is we'll work around the rest of the model as usual, and I'll come back to you when we've been all the way around and that's complete. I wasn't quite sure where to go next with colour on the metalwork. This is Vallejo aluminium. Again, it's the airbrush colour, so it goes on really nice and smoothly. Gives you more or less a coat straight away. And I think, having had a little play with it, I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to slowly work my way around all the metalwork, applying this. Again, not going on the palette, because all that'll happen is it'll just soak through. And it is literally just daubing it on and then just spreading the colour around. And then later what we'll do on the next step is we'll put a wash on it, and we will start to give it a bit more of a colour. There will be one or two areas that I skip, and as I decide which of those areas it is, I'll come back to you and I'll show you which bits I've left out. Alright, so I'll work my way around and back soon. Okay, so this is one of those like put on your big pants steps, because you are just literally slapping the silver all over, or the aluminium, and there is the potential that you've just ruined all the work you've just done. But that's why you've got to be brave, because the next step is the bit that's going to help give all of the relief, give all of the texture. We may go back in and touch with a little bit of dark aluminium once we've actually done the next step, but now to put on a wash. So for the wash, what we're going to do is use some Army Painter dark tone. It's a heavy black tone. At the moment I don't want any browns in there, so we're going to go with just a black wash, and just literally chuck it on. So I've gone to a bit more of a cheaper brush for this, and we put it on, but then what we do is we reorganise it so that it's in all the relief, and is giving us natural shades. It's picking out all of the screw work. And then when we come on to some of the robot arms, let's go try and get you a bit, there we go, that's better. So like this arm up here, for example, we just slap it on and it will literally settle into all the recesses. It will give it a dull down the whole effect. There we go. And then it's just a case of being patient and waiting for it to dry, but I'll work my way around. Let's just get a bit of focus again, and we'll pop some into the crest on the top there. And you can see it instantly gives relief. If we compare the top bit to the back bit, you can see it instantly gives relief to the recesses and to the little skulls that are in there. And then what we'll do is we'll go all the pieces that we've done, even these bits at the top, we'll pop a little bit on them and work it down to the bottom of the spike, to the bottom of the little piece next door. And then what we will do is once that's dried, we'll actually come back and we'll highlight all of the bits that we've just redarkened. But we'll just, for the time being, we'll go work our way around and I'll shut up talking and get on with it. So having had a look around the model, I have found a few more silver details, and basically I've painted those silver and then just washed them as we did before. That's better view. So now he's looking a little bit more finished. I also found a few more red bits, the claw and some of the back area, so I'll polish those off as well. So the next step will be to actually start to work on the gold. So let's grab some gold. So the first piece of gold that I'm going to do is actually just a very simple technique. I'm going to use it in a couple of places just to show you the technique, and then the rest is all going to be hand painted. So let's just do that first. So we're going to take some straightforward Army Shade, Army Painter Quick Shade. It's the strong tone, which is essentially a browny golden colour. We'll just drop a bit of that into the palette and then get the figure. And then I've prepared a section at the back here that you can see is like some sort of resonator or some weird construct device. And what we'll do is, with the background of it being silver, we will just chuck the brown on. And the silver will just promote that gold effect to come through. Just 1 second. I've managed to mix the silver with the brown tone, so we'll just get a bit of fresh. I'll try that again. So as it comes in focus, we'll just gently stroke that, and it will give us a browny hue on there that we'll see come through as it dries. We'll do this piece here just the same. Now the rest of the golds that we're going to do are going to be a much stronger gold tone. I'll just grab, so you can see it's just taking on that browny gold tone. And obviously the deeper you want the tone, you just keep applying layers. And I'm going to call, once I get a little bit more on this back piece. I'm going to call that done. And while that dries, we'll work on the rest of the gold, which is going to be a little bit more obvious a gold. We'll start off with some greedy gold. That's by Army Painter. Quite a nice strong gold tone. I will actually put it not on the palette. And we'll get a little bit of water and just, it's another one of those quite thick paints. So we will get a little bit of water on the brush just to help it move a little bit better on the figure. And then what we're going to do is we'll use the top rung on the arch on his back just to demonstrate what we're going to do. And that is literally to start with. Just run the greedy gold gently over the whole of the piece. So we've now applied the gold to the upper portion of the crest, and I also slapped a bit on his axe as well. So now what we need to do is give that some highlights. So I'm going to swap over to polished gold. Again, it's a game colour by Vallejo. Do seem to be using a lot of Vallejo colours today, but they're just the ones that are suiting. So that's a little blob of the polished gold in there. Again, we'll need to wet it down a little bit. Again, it's quite a thick colour. And then the idea here will be on all the, that's like the camera focus, on all the upper surfaces. On the upper surfaces we will just dust on the edges and just create some highlights. Let me just move that away a little bit. It's a lot more vivid in real life than it is on there. It looks very subtle on there, but in real life there is quite a marked change in the colour. But we'll carry on and we will just touch all the upper surfaces, give them a nice highlight all the way across, and then just catch that running edge. And I think you can tell from the bottom portion to the top portion that you can see that gold on there. And then we'll just catch the little triangles of gold that are in the middle. We'll just give each crest of them a little dab. And then we'll do exactly the same along the border. Ooh. And also just catch the little, there's some little studs of metal along the framework as well. Just catch the tips of those. As we work our way along. And that's that. So I'll work around the rest of the pieces doing that, and then I'll come back. Right, so we have now done the gold highlighting on both of those. I'm just going to angle the lamp away from the station a little bit and just see if we can get a little bit less shine on the gold. It really is reflecting the lamps. And you can maybe see the gold on the tops a little better now. But I'm now going to push those colours a little bit further, and what we're going to do is add some silver by Vallejo, game colour. I've already got a little bit in the palette there, and we're going to mix that, a little bit of water, and again it's quite a thick, as you can see it's quite a thick paint. We'll get a bit of the polished gold over and mix it in. Clean the brush, and then just the tip in, collect some of the paint, and just right on the tip there, you can see, literally just on the tip of the brush, and then we will go over the area and we will patch just the upper edges and the tips of the little triangles and the gaps. And you can see that better. And I will work my way around all the upper prominences, and also this edge here will give that a little line of silver as well. And we'll work around the model, and then I'll come back, and then what we're going to do is we're going to resaturate with a dark colour and put some shadows in. Now, despite the fact that we have shaded, the gold has got quite a uniform look to it, so it's actually hard to pick out some of the details. So the next step is to reinvest it with some, I'm going to use this time some soft tone. If it doesn't look strong enough, I may actually move over to the strong tone, but we'll have a look. So we'll get the soft tone, a couple of blobs in there. And then anywhere where there's gold, we'll drop the soft tone in. And we'll do the front half and compare it to the back half. And see if we've made much of a difference. So I think you can see a bit more of a structural change, especially like where you look at the triangles at the front half, you can see the definition of the edges of them compared to at the back. And if I just now do the back, you'll see the change. The only problem is my lights are, I think I've just got my lights a little bit bright today, and it's causing a bit of reflection on the metal paints. But I think you can now see, if I compare that to the opposite side, it's not done yet, I think you can see the definition has disappeared. And if I reintroduce it, on this side, straight away you can see that it gives you that relief, and that just that bit more depth in the colour. Just trying to get in behind here. It's just nice simple wash, and gives you some automatic relief in the colour. And we'll do the gold on the axe as well, and automatically you can see where it picks out the studs on the metalwork. It actually, it's a lot more visible to the naked eye than it is actually through the camera lens, to be honest. And it's certainly giving a lot more depth to the gold, and it's starting to look quite nice. So I'm going to go around all the rest of the gold work on the miniature and get all the gold work done, because there's absolutely tons, but it's that same simple format all the way around, and I'll come back when I've managed to get all of that out of the way. So we've now had a little tour around the model with the gold and actually put that technique on all the gold work I could find. A few little details to do. We've got the Adeptus Mechanicus symbols on the axe and the backpack to do. There's some small dials on the staff itself. I want to do the face. There's the servo skulls and the one limb that's fleshy rather than robotic. And then we're more or less done with the figure. We need to do the book, do the base, and we're getting there. So we're nearly done. I think the next thing we'll do is the two little dials, and that's simply careful placement, a little bit of colour in the background, and then either a white or a yellow for the actual lever in the screen itself. I'll try and do that carefully and come back to you. Now I don't know if you can see it, but I've made a start on the one at the top. I've done that in red. The one that's a little bit low down, I've just done the first line. And I'm going to drop to a slightly smaller brush because this is fine work. And I'm making sure there's plenty of moisture in the paint. And then we're going to, where are we? I'm going to draw a tiny line in the dial. And I've done a very small amount of overpaint on one side, so I'll just recover that. And then the dial itself will go for, clean my brush a bit better, we'll go for a mixture of red with a tiny little bit of white in it and try and make it stand out against the green. So literally the paint is now on the tip of the very tip of the brush. There we go, I've got the marker line in there. Okay. Right, so tidying up. We'll do the hand next and we'll get some flesh tones for that. There's a little silver tube behind it that I need to do that I've missed, and we'll get that done. One of the things that I have tried is just a couple of drops of blue ink onto the, I don't know, the main energy part of the weapon. It looks quite nice, and I've noticed there are quite a few of these modules around the place that have these little same like convolutions in them. So I'm gonna put a dab of blue ink in all of those, and the ink that I'm using is Liquitex, and it's the Thiocyanone blue, and we'll just pop a tiny little bit. It's quite a potent blue, so I will get some water on as well. So there's the tiny drop of the blue. There we go. Even with quite a bit of water, it's still quite a potent blue, and we'll just drop that into the gaps, and it just runs straight in, and just leave that to dry. Yep, done. There's one, where did I say another one? We'll do the one on the tail of his coat. Just drop a little bit into each of the windows. Sorry about that. I'm gonna need to, I've actually done quite a strong coat there, so we'll have to suck some of that back out with the brush. And then we'll use that to give a little dab into the other recesses. And did I see? Yeah, there's a couple here on the staffs. So we'll do exactly the same there. Just attack that from all angles. Okay, that's just a nice little effect that's gone on. Okay, so what do we have left to do? The hand, we'll get some flesh paints ready. So the first colour I'm going to use is a dark flesh tone. Again, that's a game colour by Vallejo. That's not very well mixed, let's give that a shake. That's not having done any painting for about 6 months, they all need a good shake. And we will just give the hand a nice covering. And it's this hand here looks like it's still got flesh on it. So we'll give this hand just a nice covering all over. With flesh tone. Or dark flesh tone. Okay. And then we will get some paler flesh. So the next colour will be a medium flesh tone, again a Vallejo paint. I've already got a little bit on the palette waiting. And that will be literally catching the upper surfaces, and I've not really left it any time between the two coats, so it looks like it's got a couple of rings on as well, so we'll just stroke over the fingers. And just down the wrist. And on the inside. We'll leave most of the inside quite dark, to be honest, and let the shadows do the work for us. Just put another little bit of flesh on the ends of his fingers, just to catch those. And then a little bit on the underside of the arm. And then the bit that's going to do the work for us is going to be going to the brighter colours. And we'll go to basics skin tone first. Again, that's another Vallejo colour. And this will be a tiny bit on the end of the brush. And then we're going to catch right at the highlights. Down his wrist. And we'll catch a little, just the edge of his arm underneath. And final will be, we will go for a little bit of elfic flesh, again a game colour, that's by Vallejo as well. So I've just popped a little bit on the palette, it was just getting a bit of a struggle there to get it out of the, well, because it had dried a little bit. So this time really gentle on the very tips of the upper surface, dots on the knuckles, to his finger there. Tiny little bit down the front of his arm. And I think we're going to leave that at that. Just the end of his finger here. Okay. So now we'll do the servo skulls. Skulls I always like doing, so it's quite enjoyable getting the tones of the browns right. I'm running out of palette, but I think we've got a little gap in the middle there, so we'll use that. So the first colour I'm going to go for is actually my first Citadel colour of the day, which is going to be Rhinox Hide. So there we have the Rhinox Hide. Lovely rich brown colour. We'll just catch the bonework, minding all the electronics on the skull. And then we'll catch the other one on the back side, and then we'll move on to our next colour. And our next colour is Citadel again. That's going to be Mournfang Brown. We'll grab a little bit of that. And then what we're going to do is just really carefully work on the skull and just catch those upper surfaces, just the top of the eyeball, or where the eyeball used to be, gently across the teeth, just tip tapping across, and then just around the back. Just picking out the skull. We'll do the same on the other one, and then we'll go to our next colour. And our next colour is back to Vallejo, and we're going for Japanese uniform World War II. And again, just going towards the highlights. So right in the centre of the forehead, then down the side of the skull, onto the top of the eyeball or eye socket, tapping the teeth again, and then just covering the top of the head. Okay. And now onto the skull at the back. So our next two colours are going to be a tone first of Game by Vallejo Bone White, and then over to Pro Acryl for Bright Ivory. So first of all with Bone White. And that really is now going to be pulling out the detail of the skull. So we are now just really just gently catching all those upper surface areas, just trying to accentuate the detail of the skull. And then just catch the back of the skull and just the side here, and then right at the top we'll get the bright ivory, and it will be just a couple of focus points to accentuate the tip of the skull. So it will be literally where the light would just catch the very edges. Okay, and I'll do the same on the other skull. So the next part is to paint the right hand side of the skull white in sort of classic style. We get a little bit of bone white. And as carefully as we can. Take that right hand side of the skull into white and then just reinforce that black on the other side. There we go, and then carry, there we go, and then carry that on for the other skulls. There's one on the back, one on the other side of the axe, and I'll just do those in the next 2 secs. So the next thing is, there are 1 or 2 tubes here and there. I'm literally going to paint those white and then run a colour over the top of them, and I think we're very close to getting finished, just the base to do and the book. So I don't know whether you guys were at school the same time as me, but I remember in chemistry classes there being, for the Bunsen burners, these orangey red tubes, and I thought actually that falls really nicely in tune with the colour of his robes. So for the bulk of the tubing I've gone with that sort of dark colour. The next thing is to do some of the corrugated hosing. Simply going to run on the upper surface some grey and black, probably a neutral grey and black, doesn't really matter what grey it is. I've got a little bit still left on the palette from earlier, and I will literally, where I can find one, let's have a little look. Trying to find a corrugated one. Okay, it looks like I haven't got any to do. I thought I had a few left to do. So we'll call that done for the tubing. And then the small boxing housing, that will be a dark grey and black. And that's literally just run on the edges, maybe a little bit greyer than that. And that's literally, let's come back up in focus. And that is just touching and giving the top edges a dusting of the grey. And I'll work around what few pieces there are. There aren't actually many pieces like that on the model. And then the only bit left to do is on the back here. There are 6 little nodules that are meant to be lit up, and I'm probably going to do those in a green. Oh, some little grey on the housing of the edges of the weapon here, and we're getting very, very close to done, so nearly there. Okay, so finishing touches. The book I'm going to keep nice and simple, and that's just going to be that we get hold of a bit more of the gold. And just gently stroke that over the symbols on the spine. And then we'll touch that up with a tiny little bit of silver added. And just highlight the very edges of it. Bit of silver mixed with the gold. and then just highlight those upper surfaces. And then the rest of the book we're going to make filthy because, oh, there's a bookmark. We'll do the bookmark in red. Just a little bit of a brighter red on top. And then we're actually going to make all this dirty and then carry those colours onto the book. So what we need now is a scrappy brush and some brown paint, and I'll probably go back to Rhinox hide for the base colour. So bear with me while I just get a bit of a fresher palette. Right then, the Rhinox hide's getting a bit broader a brush now. We'll get a big dollop onto the palette, and then the actual base of the miniature we're going to give a really good saturating of the Rhinox hide. And I will work my way dabbing that in, getting some concentration into the soil, and I'll be back in a second. Now while I'm waiting for the Rhinox hide to dry, there's two more things I want to do. One is his eyes, and two is the 6 little chambers on the back that need some light on them. I'm going to go for green with those, so it's going to be very, very quick. And we'll go for some dark green. Oh, sorry, that's a dark green by Vallejo. And literally each of the little tubes at the back is just going to get a touch of the dark green. And then we'll leave that to dry for a few seconds. Not going to see much because it's such a dark green. In fact, it'll probably just look black as you look at it. Those tiny little tubes, all got a little touch of dark green. I'm going to use, while I wait for the dark green to dry, I'm going to use some of the Pro Acryl Bright Ivory. And I'm going to make 2 tiny dots for his eyes. And then I'm going to get some fluorescent, probably red or orange, and try and see if I can make his eyes glow inside his mask here. So literally 2 I don't even know if you can see that in the inside the hood, but 2 splodges of white inside the hood. I might just need to get a little bit bigger. Okay. So tiny splodges of white inside the cowl. Now the next colour of the green on the tubes at the back is going to be yellow green, and that's again a Vallejo colour. And that's going to go onto these little tubules at the back. Just on the very tops of them. And then once I've let these dry, they're probably going to get varnished actually once they've had a chance to dry. So it is a very rough blobbing of the green on there. So the final colour we're going to add on to those little green stems is I've got a little bit of Vallejo fluorescent yellow. Mix that in with the yellow green that we've already used before, and then just tiny, can we get that focus better? Tiny blobs on the top. Just make those little tubes, just pop that a little bit more. There we go, and that's the tubes done. Back to the eyes. So I think we're going to go for fluorescent orange, again of the Vallejo colour. Well, that's not very well mixed. I'll give that a shake and come back. Right, so I'm going to try and get the fluorescent orange onto those two tiny dabs of white in the face shield. There we go. We'll just spread the orange just beyond where the dabs are, so it sort of gives a little bit of fluorescence in the whole side of the hood. There we go. Just a little bit more, I think. And just run it up the insides of the hood as well, just to give it an echo of the colour. And then we can go back to the base, and the next colour we're going to is Mournfang Brown, Citadel colour again. And again, a big chunky brush, but not too much of the paint on the brush, sort of trying to get some of it back off. And then when we're attacking the base, gently tap in, and we'll just gently catch the edges of any clothing or bits of metalwork that are nearby, just little dabs up onto the clothing as though it's been dragged through some of this mud. I'm going to do another layer on top of here, so I'm not going too heavy yet. The next layer will catch more of the clothing. And work its way up onto the miniature. But you can see that I am catching elements of the miniature as I'm working around. A little bit up onto the book. And we'll just have a look around the model and just make sure there are no areas that we've missed. And that won't take very long to dry, so we'll move straight on to the next colour, which is going to be Steel Legion Drab, again a Citadel colour. And again, we'll work that around the palette. And then again, we'll dab that onto the miniature. random areas around the base, but what we will try and do is actually try and keep it a little bit more to the edge of the base so that it looks a bit lighter at the edge and darker towards the miniature, although we will still go up onto the edge of the miniature. And then I think we're probably just going to have to go a little bit lighter there. Let me just reach over. And the final colour is going to be some Ushabti bone. And we'll get some of that on there. And that, I think, is going to be as light as we need to go on the base. And just gently catching the upper surfaces. We're going to be a lot more careful with this because it's such a pale colour. And just working our way. The book can get a good amount. It's been laid there for too long, I think. And there we go. So, one finished miniature. And now for the grand reveal.
Well, that was a marathon painting session. I think that was about 10 hours. I need to see how long it's going to get taking editing to try and condense that down into a reasonable format. Hopefully not too long. We'll see very shortly. Anyway, what do we do? What do we say here? Are we painting minis yet? Hell yeah! And I'll catch you in the next one.